pair of, what are they called? Robins as well.
We've had a
couple
robin
of seagulls that.
more.
Sorry, you go ahead.
Oh, go on. There you go ahead.
There's a couple of seagulls that nest in the what you call it, the chimney across from my bedroom window, and every morning.
They are loud.
Yeah.
All right, we are now live. To anyone who's joining us, we were discussing birds, and
we've got a lot of
that take over our homes.
We have a lot of starlings and wood pigeons here. I especially like the wood pigeons. They make good sounds.
We have one wood pigeon. I don't know if it's a particularly solitary wood pigeon, but it sometimes tries to get into the hedge tree, and it looks like it shouldn't be able to get in, but then it vanishes.
Yeah.
Right. So, yes, I think Naoise is sharing some links.
Yep. Very soon I'll be back in action.
Grand. Well, while Naoise is sharing that, we'll explain who and what we are. We're unlicensed oral arts. We're a group of storytellers. We get together, we tell stories, we go on tangents, and we have a lot of fun. To anyone who's joining us, hello, you're very welcome. I'm Emily. I've got 3 dogs, and I love fairy tales. Shannon, who are you?
Hi, I'm Shannon, as Emily so graciously introduced me, although I don't know where she is on anyone's screen, so yeah. I live in Belfast. I tell stories and I write plays, and I'm obsessed with killer plants.
I'm Stephen. I'm a storyteller, folklorist, and YouTuber. I've got 2 cats, one of whom barely counts, and I'm starting. I'm compiling a list of academics in this field that I absolutely despise.
Make the list.
Which one of your cats doesn't count?
Casper.
Oh.
Because he's a goblin?
He's far more goblin than cat, yeah.
And which academics are we targeting at the moment?
Well, one of them's still alive, so I'm not going to talk about that. I don't want to open myself up for libel.
Well, moving swiftly on then, I've done the sharing. I'm Naoise. I'm also a storyteller, in case the fact that we're a storytelling collective live streaming a session of storytelling didn't tip you off. I also have aspirations of being an actor, and I do other things like write, which nobody else gets to see because I am incredibly self-conscious about my writing.
We've been joined in the chat by Michael, who has said hello.
Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Hello. Great. So should we get to some stories?
Yeah, well, we are talking about birds. So I have one about birds, which we can kick things off with. So there was a man living in an area that would now correspond to the Gaza Strip. Don't know why I was thinking about the Gaza Strip recently. And he had 3 daughters. One day, the man decided it was time to take his Hajj to Mecca. So he asked his daughters if they wanted anything. One of them said she wanted a golden bracelet. One of them said that she wanted a new book. And one of them said that she wanted Jamaz, the king of all the birds. She then told her father that if he did not bring back Jamaz, the king of all birds, with him, may he be cursed and may his camel be struck down at Aqaba, halfway from Mecca. So he goes off, makes it to Mecca, prays very hard, I'm assuming. And then he goes around the marketplace, he picks up the gold jewelry, he picks up a new book for his 2 daughters, and then he starts to head home. And about Aqaba, his camel breaks down, dead from exhaustion, and he realizes that his daughter's curse has come true. So he has to walk all the way back to Mecca, and he starts asking around for Jamaz, the king of birds. Eventually, some of the local people tell him that all he has to do is go up to a specific house, knock 3 times, and say, "Jamaz, king of the birds, I wish for you to come to visit my daughter." So he eventually finds the house. He knocks 3 times. He says, "Jamaz, I want you to come and visit my daughter." Nothing seems to happen, but he hops on a new camel. He makes it all the way home. He gives his first daughter her gold jewelry, gives his second daughter her book, and the third daughter, well, he tells her to wait. That night, there's a tapping on the window, and outside, there's a beautiful little bird just fluttering in the air. She opens the window, in it comes, and suddenly he is an incredibly handsome naked man. And what happens when an incredibly handsome naked man arrives in the room of a rather sexually frustrated young woman? Exactly. They read poetry all night together, cuddled up, and nothing untoward happened. This continued to happen for many weeks, until the 2 older sisters caught wind of what was going on. They now apparently felt that gold jewelry and a book were nothing compared to an incredibly handsome naked man showing up in your room each night. So they asked their sister if she knew if Jamaz, the king of the birds, had any weaknesses, anything he was afraid of. Being an innocent young woman, she asked Jamaz the next time he came, and though he was a bit nervous at first why she was asking, he said that there was one thing in the world alone that could hurt him: glass. Well, the next day, the girl told her sisters this, and that night, they went to the window and smashed it, leaving a trail of broken glass all the way to the bed. That night, when Jamaz came, he let out a howl of pain as the glass embedded itself in his feet. He fluttered away as a bird, and he was not seen in that house again. Naturally, the daughter began to become more and more lovesick, and feeling guilty over what had happened to Jamaz, she set off looking for him. She traveled through the desert for many days and many nights, till eventually she saw a small olive tree, and perched on the olive tree were 2 doves. They were talking about their brother, Jamaz, king of the birds. They said that his wife had done him wrong and that he was dying, and the only way he could be cured is if the person who had done him wrong killed a dove, drained it of its blood, burnt its feathers with the blood, and then applied lotion to his feet. Well, now that she knew what to do, she went off, she slaughtered the dove, crushed it, plucked its feathers, burnt them, rubbed it all together, and then she found Jamaz. She rubbed the ointment on his feet, and he was cured. He was delighted. But then the 2 dove sisters showed up. They were not impressed. Yes, she'd healed their brother, but she had been the cause of his pain and suffering in the first place. They desperately wanted to get married, but the 2 sisters would only agree to allow her to marry Jamaz, the king of the birds, if she did something very special. So she went off, and she thought, and she thought, and she thought. She didn't know what could possibly impress the 2 doves. So she sat down by the olive tree she'd found before and began to weep, until Jamaz came. He told her that what would impress his sisters most in the world were 2 beautiful, plump, feather-filled pillows. They would need a feather from every bird in the world to complete these pillows. She didn't know how to achieve this, but Jamaz told her to merely cry out, "Jamaz, the king of the birds, is dead." And so she did. She climbed to the top of that olive tree. She began screaming as loud as she could, "Jamaz, the king of the birds, is dead." There was a silence for a while, and then a sound like a tornado. Suddenly, she looked up and saw flocks and flocks of birds of every color in the rainbow approaching from far and wide. They were wailing and squawking. One by one, each bird dove down, plucked a feather from its chest, and abandoned it at her feet. The pile grew higher and higher and higher until every bird had plucked a feather. She then gathered them up in the finest silk pillowcases and presented these pillows to the 2 dove sisters. Very impressed with her work, they agreed to let her and Jamaz marry. And that's how this nameless girl became queen of the birds. That was rather wholesome for my story.
Yeah. Oh, that was actually a nice story. What happened to you?
I
Who are
could
you
tell from your
done with
face, you were
Nisha?
waiting for it to go horrible. You were waiting for the horrific thing.
Yeah.
we didn't realize it was over because nothing had happened yet.
I thought she was going, when you said kill one of the doves, she was going to kill his sisters.
As did I when I first read that story. But apparently not, though. It's
Wow.
nice, wholesome family fun. That's the
Yeah.
last
Happy
time.
ending, Lark. No.
Yes, that was it. He got a visit from the happy ending lark. That's why the bird story had a happy ending.
Right. Actually, I've got a bird story.
Oh, so do I. We
With a-
accidentally did a theme.
Yeah, what's happened to us? I was watching a film the other day with my parents called A Call to Spy, about some of the first female spies sent over into occupied France in World War II. Yes, World War II. And one of them was, and I'm going to hold this up because I cannot trust myself to pronounce her name. I know the first name is Noor, but
Nor in Inuit Khan. I don't. The last one is Khan, definitely. But the middle one.
yeah, I only speak English, and I'm not going to trust myself to try to pronounce that. But I know her first name was Noor. She was a radio operator who was sent off into occupied France at a time when a radio operator would only last about 2-3 months. She lasted 4 months because it was an incredibly dangerous job, and she had to lug this huge radio transmission. And if she stayed on transmission too long, the Nazis could find her. She was unfortunately captured and murdered after spending 10 months in a concentration camp. But she was an incredibly interesting woman. Her father was Indian, her mother was American. She was a dedicated pacifist, but she and her brother both decided that they would join the war effort because they wanted to stop the evils of fascism, but they joined in pacifist roles. She initially joined as a radio operator. He joined as a medic. But before war broke out, she wrote and translated a number of stories and tales. Her father was the leader of, if I'll just pull it up, her father was the leader of the Sufi Order International, and she was very much followed his ways and was very much following the ideas of Gandhi and pacifism. But a lot of the stories she translated they're sort of like Aesop's fables, the stories with animals, and they're sort of instructional, but I always find the Aesop's fables a bit sort of bitter, almost. I don't think Aesop seemed to have been a very happy person when he was writing his fables. But I got her book, one of her books, and I'd very much recommend it. The stories are very short. A lot of them involve animals, and they're just lovely stories. So I'm going to tell you 2 of them after that long tangent. And the first story is a story about birds, and it's called The Golden Feather. Once upon a time, there was a man who had 1 wife and 3 daughters. They were happy together, but they were quite poor. And as his daughters began to grow older, he began to wish that he could give them all the finer things in life, that he could give them silks to wear, jewels for their hair, and that they could live their lives never having to worry about becoming hungry or if the roof over their head would be taken away. So one day, he said to his wife and his 3 daughters, "I am going to go out into the world and make my fortune. When I return, I shall make it so that you shall never have to worry about money in your life again." And he went out. He didn't have a plan. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew that somewhere out in the world, he could make his fortune. And one night, as he was traveling, he met a fairy spirit. The fairy spirit asked him, "What are you doing out so late at night?" And he told them about how he had gone out into the world and promised not to return until he could see to it that his wife and daughters would be financially secure for the rest of their lives. The fairy spirit smiled, tapped him on the shoulders, and the man began to feel incredibly strange. His neck felt longer and bendier than it had, and his feet felt flatter, and when he looked down at his arms, he didn't have arms. He had feathers. He had wings. He stretched them out. He'd become a goose. He cried out, "Oh, how will I ever make the fortune of my wife and children if I'm a goose? What good is a goose?" He sat there feeling very sorry for himself and then began to think, well, at least if I go back to them, they'll have a good meal. Very sadly, the man who was now a goose began to waddle back home. But he passed by a river and saw something shining in the water, something glittering gold. He thought, there is my fortune. I can dive down, and whatever it is, I can bring it back. And so he did. But any time he went and touched the water, the shimmering gold seemed to disappear. When the sun finally shone down, he saw that the glimmering gold was not in the water. It was his own feathers. For he was not a normal goose. He was a goose with feathers of purest gold. He was overjoyed. He spread his wings and flew back to the house of his wife and his daughters. He sat on the roof and called and called and called. The 4 women ran out, thinking, what is that sound? The daughters looked up and said, "Mother, mother, see, there's a beautiful bird on the roof." The bird shook one of his wings and a single golden feather flew down. The mother picked it up and saw that it was indeed made of purest gold. She ran to the market and sold it. The next day, the girls called to their mother, "Mother, mother, the bird is back." Again, the 4 women stood in the garden. This time, the bird shook his other wing. Again, a single feather flew down, a single feather of pure gold. And this happened day after day after day. And the woman and her 3 children, they had much food, they wore beautiful clothes, and they were very happy. But the wife, the mother of the 3 daughters, began to worry. What if one day the goose didn't come back? What if their source of wealth ran out? And so she decided she would make sure this could not happen. She would catch the golden goose. And so she laid out a trap. She set out seeds and bread and milk and laid them out and called to the bird to come down. The man, who was now a goose, was thankful that his wife seemed so appreciative of his gifts. He flew down and began to peck, but as he did, she grabbed him and threw him into a barrel. The goose became very, very upset, especially as his wife began to reach into the barrel and pluck out all of his feathers. But as she plucked out each golden feather, it turned to white. For the gift could only be given, not taken. And the featherless goose sat there, depressed in his barrel, until at last his feathers grew again, and he flew away, never to be seen. So that's one of the stories. I mean, Naoise gave us a happy story, so I have to give us a sad story.
Oh, that's really weird.
Yeah.
My story's happy.
Yeah.
What's wrong?
The tables have turned.
Well, it's not that bad. It's not like you've made one of us make the face.
I know. Oh, I'm just saying we've got some more stuff in the chat. Hello, people in the chat. Yeah, someone's remarking on how PG Naoise's story was.
Yeah.
And that Aesop is Joe. Oh, that was you, Naoise, saying that
it?
Aesop is Joe Duffy.
That man never stays out of the news for long.
I have a story, and it's not about a bird. It's about possibly the largest enemy of birds, a cat. There's been much said about the bond between a man and his cat. Now, in Dublin, near the Liffey Valley, there's a little bit outside of Dublin, where not too long ago it was rolling hills and fields and small little villages. There lived a man named Michael. Michael, he lived in a tiny little village, and to go do his shopping, and of course to go to the betting shop, he would need to go to the next village over. Now, how would he get there? He biked it. Back in those days, you had a bike, or you had a horse, or you walked. So his regular commute to the bookies involved him pulling his bicycle up one hill and then freewheeling down the other hill. Now, one particular day, as he was leaving his home to go out to the bookies, his next door neighbour, an old woman, came up to him, and she was weeping and she was crying, and she said, "My cat, I don't know where he's gone. I can't find my cat." And Michael said, "Okay, fine." So off he went to the bookies, and then back that evening after the bookies and a couple of pints with his winnings, he walks into his home only to see the cat. He looks into the cat's eyes. The cat stares back into his. And when people's eyes meet in such a way, there's only one way it can go. The woman next door heard a terrible rowdy noise coming from his house. It sounded like cats fighting, or people being murdered. The screams. Oh, the screams, they were unearthly. And the next morning, Michael, he rolled out of his bed and he looked across at his furry companion and he smiled. He made them a lovely breakfast of kippers. And then, of course, well, it was time to go to the bookies. There was a race on. So off he goes to the bookies, waving his love goodbye at the door, and the cat turning and waving its tail in reply, showing it his arse, because that's how cats show their love. He's on his bicycle on the way to the bookies, and he hears a terrible yell, a terrible screaming from behind. He's thinking, that sounds a little bit familiar. He turns around and straight back on his bike to his house, and he sees the woman from next door, the old lady. She's weeping and crying, and at her feet is the body of his one true love, the cat. He wasn't quite sure what had happened, whether the cat had been killed in ecstasy, had a heart attack from their exertions the night before, or whether the woman had murdered her own cat out of sheer jealousy. Either way, the creature was dead. The woman was distraught, and she said to him, "I can't bury this cat, but you seem to have a special connection to it. It cried out your name with its dying breath." He was like, "A cat doesn't talk, but okay, fine." So he picks up the beautiful furry beast, brings it into his home, but he can't bring himself to get rid of it. He puts it into a sack, goes down to the river, but think of his love floating down the Liffey in a bag. No, that wasn't the right way. Weeks and weeks he pondered, how could he honour this cat's life? Meanwhile, the cat sat in his house, and the smell grew. The smell permeated everything, and soon the next door neighbour moved away. The neighbours on the other side moved away, and no one would come within 500 yards of Michael's house. Eventually, Michael, he figured out a good way to honour that cat. Takes the cat, which is now fairly mushy, to say the least, and he gets on his bicycle. He starts cycling towards the next town. You see, he has a plan. He's going to go to the bookies, and he's going to win. He's going to win every single bet he makes, and with the fortune he'll have, well, he'll buy the cat a golden coffin, house forever. Now he's cycling up, and he has to pull his bike up the hill, and he's finding it a bit difficult to carry the cat and carry the bike and go up the hill. So what he does is he unzips his jacket, puts the cat inside the jacket, zips it up, and continues to push the bike up the hill. When he gets to the top of the hill, well, what does he do? He gets on the bike, and he starts to freewheel down. But then he's going fast. He's going really fast. He's going so fast he doesn't think he can stop, and then he feels something move inside his jacket. He hears a little meow coming from the jacket. And he screams. Ah! He tries to brake. The brakes on his bicycle aren't working. He tries to stick his foot out, and he sticks his foot in the spoke of the bike, and he goes rolling, tumbling over the front of the bicycle. And all he can hear as he does do is and he falls flat on his face. The only thing between him and the cold, hard ground is the cat. He unzips his jacket. The cat is dead again. So what does he do? Well, he goes ahead with his original plan. He goes to the bookies, he bets, and he bets, and he bets, and he loses everything. But at least he still had the cat. He had her stuffed, put on the mantelpiece, and there she stays till this day.
There is some terrible commentary in the chat.
Oh, beautiful.
Would you care to explain yourself, Stephen?
What?
Well, yeah. The idea is that the taxidermist would have put in like probably a silicone sleeve.
Oh my
Round the
God,
back.
Stephen!
I was asked to explain.
Well, I think that's a lovely romance between a feline and a man.
Yeah.
As interesting as romances go, it's right up there with the thing in the water.
We started with a lovely romance.
You see, it was all a sneak attack. I did a lovely story, so you'll all have to compensate with something weird.
Yeah. I haven't seen these comments. But,
Okay.
oh dear.
All right,
Okay,
so
Stephen, do a nice story, please.
well, I was gonna do a nice bird story, but now the door's been opened. So it's not quite as bad as necrotic bestiality, but I do have a nice enough story. So Aristotle, he and his brother, his older brother Barry, they didn't really get along very well. They'd never quite seen eye to eye. And as time wore on and they both got older, they drifted further and further apart. They just didn't like each other very much. And then one day, Harry found himself attending his older brother's wake. Even as a corpse, Harry didn't want to spend any time with his brother Barry. Now, as is traditional at a wake, someone had to be in the room with Barry all through the wake. And people were taking it in turns to do that. And Harry, he avoided it as much as he could, avoided his turn. He just sat there in the kitchen drinking all morning, all afternoon, all evening. And eventually it came to 2 o'clock in the morning. There was nobody else awake to take their turn. There was nobody else to put it off on. Harry had to sit with his brother's corpse. So he goes into the room and he sits with his brother, awkwardly avoiding looking at the body as much as he could. He tried playing solitaire, he tried reading, anything to keep himself occupied. But after an hour or so, an entire day of drinking caught up on him. And he was desperate for a piss. He stood up and he called for somebody else to come look after the body while he was gone. But nobody else was awake. Or else they were awake and they were pretending not to be. Either they wanted Harry to finally take his turn, or they were just fucking wrecked. So eventually Harry realizes that he's on his own. No one's going to help him. And he thinks to himself, sure, fuck it, it'll be grand. He runs off to the toilet as fast as he can. He pisses like a racehorse. And he comes back into the room. He looks down at his brother's body lying on the table, and it's a good 1.5 feet shorter. And while his brother had a good head of hair on him, this body was bald as an egg. And while his brother had a rather large round nose, this one had a sharp little nose. And he thought to himself, fuck it. What have I done? And you have to understand, Harry was absolutely fucking fuck-faced at this point in time. His sense of logic was completely out the window. So he decides the best thing to do is dispose of the evidence before anybody sees it. So he starts taking turf from beside the fireplace and piling it up around the body. He takes a bottle of whiskey and he douses the body, and he lights a match. And then comes a creaking voice.
What are you doing, Harry Stotter?
Harry turns pale and he looks back, and he can see this body, this strange body he doesn't recognize, is now sitting up and looking at him. And he says, I was going to burn the body. And at that, the body screams. It jumps off the table and runs down the hall, runs straight out the door, and Harry runs after it. He doesn't even really know why. He's just realized it's running away. I better chase it. In the logic of a drunk man or a dog. Chasing it out the front door, he suddenly trips, sprawls on the ground, and when he gets up, there's absolutely no sign of it. He turns around to see what he tripped over. And there's the corpse of Barry Stottle lying in the doorway, stiff with rigor mortis. Harry didn't mention this to anyone for weeks after, until he happened to run into an old wise woman. He decided, sure, who else would I ask? And she said that long, long before, the custom of the fairies hadn't been to steal children, but corpses or the dying, and replace them with a changeling, which is what Harry had found on the table in place of his brother.
Feckin' fairies coming in here, stealing our corpses. There's nothing sacred.
I want
are dead.
I want one day for you, Stephen, to publish the adventures of Harry Stottle.
I fully intend on it eventually.
Many-
I decided Harry has a large family.
The many amblings and misadventures of Harry
What was that,
Stottle.
Nisha?
The many wanderings and amblings of Harry Stottle.
Harry Stottle, poet, philosopher, L fella.
And Nisha
Well,
is making filthy comments in the chat.
I'm making up a kinky story. And well, since the filth gates have been well and truly opened,
dear.
it's not actually that bad. It's not that bad. It's just a bit of fun.
Really?
Really, I'm trying to desperately remember the really bad one I have for later.
Oh God.
Now, the first one, it's actually a continuation, kind of a continuation on from last time, because last time I was talking about Niasa and Cathbad and how they spawned the monster that is Crohor MacNessa. But this time I want to talk about a different child of Cathbad's, his daughter, and I'm going to mispronounce this, Fincombe? We'll call her Fincombe. Now, I'd love to tell you who Fincombe's mother is, but I don't know. All I know is that her mother is from Connacht. This is very important for later on. Anyway, Fincombe was married to Amergan Darkhair, but he doesn't really bear much significance in the story, apart from the fact that, well, he was firing blanks. That's what I think, anyway. The text claims that there was a hesitation of children upon Fincombe, but if Margaret Atwood has taught me anything, men are always the root of the problem, especially when it comes to issues of fertility. So Fincombe really, really wants a child. And being the daughter of a druid, she decides that the only logical thing to do is call a druid. She knocked on some elder sticks, she tripped on some mistletoe or something, waited the requisite 5 or 7 hours, and eventually a well-dressed man in a feather cloak showed up. She told the druid that her husband's issues and listened intently while nodding sagely at appropriate moments until she'd finished. And then the druid got up, looked her in the eye, and he told her he could guarantee her a child, effective immediately, no questions asked, as long as his fee was satisfactory. As Cathbad's daughter, Fincombe was well aware of the extortionate fees charged by druids. I mean, seriously, guys, it was bad. They had this whole racket going. They controlled all the knowledge of medicine and magic, and they'd only dole it out in small drips and drabs to the underlings they deemed worthy. Maintaining a monopoly on such essential services guaranteed them a luxurious lifestyle funded by their vicious overheads. Anyway, problems with a small group of powerful individuals controlling access to essential life-saving services aside, Fincombe told the druid that she had an appropriate fee. The fee was paid, and the druid, who I realize until this point I have not named, what's a good name for an elitist corporate shill with a background in medicine?
Leo.
So Bradker tells Fincombe to meet him at the local well tomorrow. The next day, Fincombe heads to the well, which was located in a rather dense thicket nearby. She sees Varadkar hunched over the well, smokes from scented herbs billowing about him as he's mumbling chants and prophecies. Varadkar told Fincombe to kneel down and close her eyes. She did so, and she heard what sounded like the druid fumbling with his robes, and then some sound of skin on skin, and eventually a little groan, and the faintest sound of a splash, like a little drop of morning dew falling off the leaf, landing into a little puddle with a small drip. She opened her eyes, and she sees Varadkar standing there, slightly pink in the cheek, over a pail of water. Wash yourself on that, concentrating on the problem area, and you shall conceive a son. And not only that, he shall grow up to be a bane to his mother's family, not resting until the rivers run red with the blood of the people of Connacht, said Varadkar, who to this day hates the west of Ireland, particularly Sligo. Look it up. Fincombe was gripped by complicated emotions. The child she had always wanted was within her grasp, but it would be at a terrible cost to her people. At least I think she was. Again, I don't know who her mother was. For all I know, her mother had abandoned Fincombe at a young age, causing her to be raised exclusively in Ulster by her father, growing up with to irrationally label all women from Connacht as infant-hating child abandoners who wouldn't think twice about eating you backwards through a hedge? Again, I don't know. Probably not, because their brother is about to show up and, we'll get to that. So Fincombe was having an ethical crisis or reveling in the upcoming slaughter of the child abandoners of Connacht. Either way, she went to the pail and she started washing herself. Radker watched. We can only assume this was part of his fee. And after a moment, Fincombe noticed that there was something in the water. She scooped it up in a cup. She looked inside and she saw there was a small worm. Should I drink this too? She asked Radker, but she didn't wait for a response. She drowned that sucker in one gulp and smiled, knowing that she was now truly pregnant. Because this is Ireland, fuckers. This is how we do it. Sex, fuck that, too sinful. No, you get a druid to jizz off into a pail of water and you drink a worm. Bam, pregnant. And pregnant she was. Now, around this time, her brother, Keth MacMagach, enters the narrative. Incidentally, this brings us no closer to learning the identity of their mother, because I looked up Magach, and apparently it means pause or clumsy. So to me, it's Ket, the son of heavy petting. And in a way, I think we are all the children of heavy petting. Anyway, he shows up. He hears his sister is about to give birth into the west of Ireland's personal antichrist. And he promises that he will keep her safe until the birth of her son. And he takes her away to a secluded hideaway. Time passed. And eventually, the worm had done its magic. Fincombe went into labour. Sensing this, a whole coterie of Leinster-based druids made the journey to their secret hiding location. They showed up and started dancing around her, chanting and prophesying doom and death to the people of Connacht over the increasingly dilated Fincombe. Despite distraction, she powered through, and soon she was pushing her son out into the world. But no sooner had the baby breathed his first breath than Ket was on him. You see, Ket was actually an incredibly patriotic Connacht man, the type that would today claim that Galway is the real capital of Ireland, or that Sligo is actually a city, or that Supermax is anything special. He hadn't offered to protect Fincombe to keep her baby safe. No, the fucker was camping the spawn. And this just adds further confusion to the issue of Fincombe's mother. Seemingly, Ket had an excellent opinion of the people of Connacht, and he'd never dreamed that the people of the West could be anything but hard-working, decent folk with a knack for music and high-concept performance art. If anything, child-abandoning, backwards hedge-eating women existed only in the area surrounding Limerick, or maybe Kerry. So, did this good opinion come from his mother? Maybe. Maybe he knew that Fincombe had been taken away when they were young children. Maybe Fincombe was his older sibling, was his youngest sibling, and he'd gone to know the mother longer. I'm not sure. Maybe there was a horrific divorce between Catfoot and Fincombe's mother. Maybe they each decided to take one children. Fincombe taken to Ulster and poor Ket taken to Connacht, where they were raised with their parents' hatred of their opposite parents' home province, installing a horrific hatred in these children, destroying any potential sibling relationship for many years until finally he learns that his sister has conceived a child that she's wanted for all her life. He, out of the goodness of his heart, offers to protect her, but learning that her child will be the personal Antichrist of Connacht, he goes through an ethical dilemma. Does he sacrifice the new burgeoning relationship with his sister, which is only formed after 7 months together in the wilderness, or does he slay this horrible beast? Or maybe he didn't give a fuck. I don't know. We don't know who his mother is. Maybe she was a bitch. Regardless, Ket, as soon as the baby came out of the womb, grabbed him, flung the baby to the ground, and began to press his boot into its neck. But what he wasn't counting on was the coterie of Dublin-based druids. They were on him in a flash, dragging him up, tying him up in red tape, charging him exorbitant prices for a basic cost of living, and to boot, they got him drunk. Now, Fincombe had managed to recover from the sight of her brother flinging her baby on the ground. She picked up her little tiny infant, cradled him in her arms, and thankfully, though his neck was rubbed raw and crooked, she could see the baby was alive and kicking. He screamed at her brother. "Oh, this wolfish betrayal you have done to me, brother." "Yes," he said, "wolfish betrayal indeed. And from this day, your son shall be called Connell." And so it was. That makes an awful lot more sense in the original Irish. But regardless, that is how Conall Cernach was born.
Emily made the face.
Yeah.
Oh God. I mean, it's such a consistent image of someone getting pregnant by eating a worm. Like, there has to be something in that. Like,
We were talking about it earlier that no one in the Ulster cycle seems to have what we would consider a normal conception.
No.
yeah.
Honestly, I think that was probably the medical understanding of how it worked at the time.
Yeah.
Like that it was literally just no, it's oral. It's oral. That's how it works.
Well, that might explain why she and her husband were having difficulty conceiving.
Probably.
But actually, on that difficulty conceiving in a relationship, I don't have it to hand, but I got myself a book of old Breton law because that's the type of thing I do.
Yeah.
Don't know the current laws very well, but look at the old Breton laws. And there was a thing in a marriage, if the couple were having trouble conceiving, where they could go on sort of like a year-long separation, and in that year the wife could sleep with anyone she liked, and if she became pregnant, that child conceived in that year was legally the child of her husband. It was sort of like the early version of IVF.
Huh.
Because they had no idea how conception actually works. Is it this one, Emily?
Yeah, it's that one.
Okay. I got that at UCD years and years ago.
I think going with the thread of Cathbad being the only straight man in the whole Ulster cycle.
By straight man,
yeah, the comedic
both ways. But that he probably had a very normal, by today's standards, conception and birth, and everyone probably thought it was really weird. Like, why is the fetus not screaming? How many worms did you eat?
What's wrong with this woman? I put my penis inside her and now she's got a child.
I do have to dispute Cathbad as the only straight man in Ulster when the behavior of Crahor MacNessa is like the most like cishet white guy. He's like the platonic ideal
of toxic masculinity.
You see, that sort of toxic masculinity is often born from
Actually, another straight man in the other sense of the word, Lay, Cuchulainn's charioteer, has to put up with so much shit going on around him.
Charioteers were the stand-up comedians of their day. I am convinced.
How did Lay also manage to escape the curse of Ulster? Because the whole thing was, Cuchulainn, magic special, escapes the curse of Ulster. And his buddy as well who helps him out.
I like to think that the version where, because my favorite version of how Cuchulainn gets over the curse isn't the one, like, because I know there's like, he's exempt because he's not actually from Ulster, he's exempt because he's too young. I like the one where he goes, no, actually, I'm just going to rip the curse out of my stomach and beat it up.
Oh, I haven't heard that one.
No, there's one where Cuchulainn literally rips the labour pains and maca out of his stomach, beats it up. So I like to think he then went along to the leg and just went, right, I'm going to rip out your curse too, and I'm going to beat it up. Because that's how Cuchulainn solves issues. He just beats the shit out of it.
My favorite one is the no beard thing. Yeah, which pretty much makes me think that Cuchulainn was trans.
Yeah. Wouldn't be surprised.
But he is always trying to live up to this impossible masculine ideal.
there's entire essays that could be written on. In fact, there already are on some queer readings of Cuchulainn. You could write essays on that one too.
I have an excellent feminist reading of the Toan, which I think it started out as a dissertation, but it's now one of those big, weighty academic tomes.
I've found a very interesting article on how transformation, especially into animals in mythology and folklore, might actually have been a way of talking about battlefield PTSD, because a lot of the behaviors between the two things line up. And that Cuchulainn's entire story is just like a tragedy, an example of what a lifetime of battle turns a person into.
Yeah, I also am convinced that Cormac Nessa tried to kill him by accidentally forgetting he was still out there when they released the dog.
The article I was reading didn't suggest that Crahor was trying to kill him, but that he was trying to test him to see how good he had gotten. But it was definitely intentional.
Do you know, that's just reminded me, there's another story which I cannot find in most versions, like the Lady Gregory ones, that takes place between, I'm pretty sure it's between, it's either between him arriving at Auanwaca and becoming the Hound, or it's just after it becomes the Hound, but before he takes up arms. I think it's that one. But basically, there's a battle just south of Auanwaca between Ulster and Leinster, and it goes horribly wrong. The Red Branch Knights are forced into a rout, and they get back to Auanwaca and realize, oh shit, we've left Crahor behind. Oh fuck, somebody should go out and get him. Nobody's willing to go out and get him because he's a dick. Until Cuchulainn goes, I'll go. And so he goes out, and the Morrigan's everywhere. She's all crows at once, just peering at him, squawking at him, teasing him, until eventually he finds Crahor, and he's trapped under this huge pile of corpses. And eventually Cuchulainn rips them all off, and he goes, can you make it back to Auanwaca, uncle? He goes, oh no, couldn't possibly, without some food. So Cuchulainn has to go off, kill a pig, slaughter the pig, cook him a nice roast dinner. Him and Crahor have the roast dinner. Then he goes, okay, Crahor, you ready to go home now? No, still too tired from the battle injury. Sure, go and fetch my shield, and then you, 8-year-old boy, carry me home on that shield. He puts Crahor on the shield, lifts it over his head, and has to carry him all the way back to Auanwaca. Lazy bastard.
You got to admire it, though.
Oh yeah.
No.
No, you don't.
I still think we need the sitcom Everybody Hates Crahor.
Yeah.
I'd love to see just a sitcom of Irish mythological people.
It would work so well as a sitcom.
I want the one where St. Patrick has married Oisin's daughter, and then he comes back from Tirnanog.
Yeah.
I still think the Ulster cycle casting established Irish comedians would be hilarious. I think who was it? Dara O'Brien as Capet would be hilarious.
I was always thinking Dylan Moran as Capet, just so fucking tired and
Dylan
resigned.
He's
Who's Dylan
Aliel.
Sorry, who's he playing?
Aliel.
Oh yeah.
Definitely.
Oh. Right, I'm going to tell a story that involves. No, it actually doesn't involve any weird birth, but does involve questionable practices. So fits in with the family. I don't know why I click my knuckles. I do that sometimes. I clack my knuckles a lot, but I don't mean to do it before just going into a story. I think. Never mind the tangent. Okay. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful queen called Silvertree. She was so beautiful that when she walked past a pool of water, the fish would all swim up to the surface, thinking a second moon had appeared in the sky. And Silvertree would lean over the pool of water and ask the fish, Tell me, my dear little fishies, have you ever seen a queen as beautiful as me?" And the little fish would always shake their little heads. Silvertree was married to a king and gave birth to a daughter she called Goldtree. And Goldtree grew up to be every bit as beautiful as her mother. And one day, Goldtree and Silvertree were walking together. They came to a pool of water, and the little fish swam up, thinking there was a second moon in the sky. And Silvertree leant over the water and asked, "Tell me, my dear little fishies, have you ever seen a queen as beautiful as me?" And the little fish shook their heads, all but one. One little fish spoke up and said, "Yes, yes, I have. She's standing just behind you." Silvertree turned to look and saw that standing behind her was Goldtree. Now Goldtree had grown up to be as beautiful as her mother, and then had kept growing. Silvertree now looked on her daughter as one woman looks on a rival, and deep inside her breast some small little poisonous seed began to grow, its tendrils knotting about her heart, piercing them with its thorns. Goldtree was more beautiful. Silvertree took to her room. She blocked out all the light, locked the doors, and everyone thought the queen was dying. Her husband ran to the door, banging on it, begging for Silvertree to come out. He promised her anything. He would do anything in his power if only she would come out. He would do anything to help her. "Anything?" she asked. "Yes, anything. I swear upon my kingdom, upon my honor, upon my life, I will do anything." "There is only one thing that can make me well again, and that is the heart and liver of your daughter, Goldtree." The king was horrified with what his wife was asking him. To kill his own daughter, to cut out her heart and liver. But he had sworn. He went to Goldtree and told her mother had gone mad. She needed to get away, go far away, sail to the kingdom across the sea. He had allies there and they would keep her safe. Once he had bid farewell to his daughter, the king went into the forest and found a deer. He cut its heart and its liver. He placed them on a silver platter and brought them to Silvertree. When he opened the door, Silvertree fell on the still steaming offal. She ate at it, smearing the gore onto her skin, feeling certain that she absorbed the beauty of Goldtree as she did. The king, he didn't stay to watch. He had broken his word, and so he gave up his honor, his kingdom, his life, and disappeared. Across the sea, though, Goldtree had met the king of the land across the waves. The two had fallen in love, but Goldtree was still frightened that one day her mother would find her, would come and kill her. The king, though, promised he would protect his wife. If they ever heard news that Silvertree was coming across the sea, he would lock Goldtree in the deepest, darkest dungeon. There was only one key. He would take that key with him and go far away. That way, Silvertree could not lay a finger on the beautiful Goldtree. And time passed for a while, until one day Silvertree was walking in the woods. She came to a pool of water, and the little fish swam up, thinking there was a second moon in the sky. Silvertree leant over the water and asked, "Tell me, my dear little fishies, have you ever seen a queen as beautiful as me?" One little fish spoke up, saying, "Yes, actually. Across the sea, in the land of a wave, there is a queen who is far more beautiful than you. They call her Goldtree." Silvertree then knew that she had been tricked. She called for her men-at-arms, her warriors, her great ships, and prepared to sail across the sea. Standing up in a tall tower, Goldtree saw the ships coming. She ran to her husband and cried, "My mother is coming to kill me." The king took his wife deep down into the dungeon, locked her in, and then went away with the only key. When Silvertree arrived on the shores with her army, she marched to the castle and demanded to be taken to her daughter. She was taken down into the dungeon. She demanded the door be opened, but no one had the key. She then began to call out to Goldtree, saying she was so sorry. She'd been sick. She didn't know what had come over her. Oh, it was so awful. Her daughter was now married to a man who locked her in a dungeon. But Goldtree called out, oh, actually, she was perfectly fine in the dungeon, really. Really, she was fine. Her mother could just go away. Things were fine. But Silvertree stayed outside and wept. Oh, would her daughter not forgive her? Would she not even stick her little finger through the keyhole, just so she could give her just a little kiss and a blessing? And Goldtree thought, well, what harm could her mother do to her little finger? And so she stuck it through the keyhole. And quick as a flash, Silvertree pulled out a poison pin and stabbed it beneath Goldtree's nail. Goldtree fell to the floor as if dead, and Silvertree went home with her armies, her warriors, and her long ships. When the king returned home, he went to the dungeon, he opened the door, and he found Goldtree lying on the floor. He held her in her arms, but her skin was cold. She was dead. She was gone. He thought he could protect her, but now she was gone. The king stayed there holding his dead wife. People came and said that they must prepare for a funeral, they must bury her, but he couldn't bear the thought of putting her into the ground, of dirt covering her face, of worms eating away at her flesh, of her being alone. So he had that dungeon room turned into a tomb. The body of Goldtree was laid out on a stone bed, and each night the king would go down alone, would lie beside the body of his wife and weep. But he was a king, and a king needs an heir. And eventually he was persuaded to take a new wife. Now his new wife was not as beautiful as Goldtree, but she was kind and she was clever, and there was a sort of happiness between them. But every night still he would leave their bed and go where the new bride knew not. Around his neck he always wore a key, and whenever she asked, what does that key open, he would just turn away sadly. The new bride became determined to find out what did that key open. And so one day, when the king was at his bath and had taken off the key, she stole it. She went all through the castle, trying it in each door, and at last she came to a door in the dungeon that fitted the key. She opened it up, and she saw lying there on a bed of stone the body of Goldtree, the body of her husband's first wife. This was where he came each night. Her mind began to fill with horrible images she did not want to think about but could not push away. She drew closer to the corpse and saw that the hand was closed as if holding something. One by one, she opened the fingers, peeling them back, and she noticed that beneath the nail of one there was something stuck. She pulled out the pin, and with a gasp, Goldtree came alive. The new bride screamed because the corpse had just come to life. Goldtree screamed because there was a woman in her face screaming. The king up in his bath heard the two women screaming and ran, barely having time to grab a towel. He arrived in the dungeon and saw his wife, and he was overjoyed. And then he was troubled, because it's perfectly fine having two wives if one of them's dead. When they're both alive, things tend to get a bit more complicated. Goldtree and the new bride recognised this, and they said that they would go away together and they would come up with a solution. They sat and they talked, and after many days together, they came to their decision. They went back to the king and said that as Goldtree had been dead and returned to life, she would be queen when the earth was dead and returned to life. She would rule in winter and spring. The new bride would rule in summer and autumn. And since they both loved him and he loved both of them, and they seemed to get on quite well together, they would both remain married. This was their decision, and there were 2 queens against 1 king, so their decision was final. And the 3 of them, they lived very happily for a time. Back across the sea, though, one day Silvertree was walking in the wood. She came to a pool and the fish swam up to the surface because they thought 2 moons had appeared in the sky. Silvertree leant over and asked, "Tell me, my dear little fishies, have you ever seen a queen as beautiful as me?" And all the little fish began to shake their heads, saying, "Oh, across the sea, there is a beautiful queen. She was dead, but now she's alive, and they call her Goldtree." Silvertree now knew what had to be done. She called for her druids. She called for her wise men. She had them concoct a potion so foul and noxious it had to be carried in a metal cup. She rowed across the sea. Standing in a tall tower, Goldtree looked out and saw the ships coming. She ran to her husband and the new bride and said, my mother is coming across the sea, and this time she truly means to kill me." The king had no idea what to do. His first plan had failed. But the second wife, she had an idea. She said all 3 of them should meet Silvertree when she landed. And when Silvertree leapt from her ship holding the metal cup, the 3 of them stood there and welcomed her. Silvertree held the cup high and said, "My dearest darling, may I propose a toast to your union?" She held the cup out to Goldtree, but the new bride stepped forward and said, "We have a custom in this land. Whoever proposes a toast must be the first to drink." The king grabbed Silvertree. The new bride prized open her jaws, and Goldtree herself took the cup and tipped the poison down her mother's throat. Silvertree then watched as her flesh began to dissolve. She began to twist and writhe, and when the potion was finished working, there was nothing left but a filthy froth that was washed away by the sea. And Goldtree, the new bride, and the king, they went away. And this time they did live happily ever after.
A lovely story and a ringing indictment of polyamory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that it ends with a polyamorous triad. That's fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, if like he loves both of you, you both love him, you get on, you can make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they should have gotten rid of the king and just ruled together, though.
I mean, they might end up doing that.
Robin sounds like he's just a figurehead at this point anyway. So
yeah.
I see from the chat, yes, those fishes do need to stop being such snitches.
She asked them a question. Oh, the rise of Bronze Tree.
Bronze Tree, the daughter of Goldtree, then?
I don't know. Maybe that's what we'll call the new bride, Bronze Tree.
Bronze Tree, excellent.
No. Bronze Tree's the daughter of Silvertree.
But Goldtree's the daughter of Silvertree.
So is Bronze Tree the grandmother? It's getting
I
more
think you're
refined.
overthinking this.
Oh. Right, so who's next?
I have a story that's
Yep.
Right, so it's set in Japan, which means that my pronunciation of the names and places is going to be all over the shop. It's a story about a man called Kwashin Koji, or something like that, but pronounced properly. Kwashin Koji, he was a man who dressed like a Shinto priest, but preached Buddhist doctrine. Now, he was known in Kyoto for a painting that he had, a kakemono, which is a painting that folds out from a big scroll-like thing. Now, this particular painting, it depicted all of the various levels of hell that you could end up in. And the painting was so beautiful, so wonderful, that people actually believed what they saw on it. They believed that the rivers of blood were running. They believed that if they touched the fires on the painting, they would burn. It even looked like the demons were moving. Now, the local lord, a man called Lord Nobunaga, he heard about Kwashiorkor, and he heard about this painting. He desperately, desperately wanted to see it and maybe to possess it. So he sent his retainer, a man called Arakawa, to bring Kwashiorkor to his palace. So off Arakawa goes, and he brings Kwashiorkor and the kakemono to the palace. There, Kwashiorkor unrolls the painting and shows it to the Lord, and it is as amazing and as terrifying as he had heard. The Lord then whispered into Arakawa's ear. He said, "I must possess this painting. I must. Will you ask him to offer it up for his Lord?" And Arakawa goes to Kwashiorkor and he says, "Will you offer this up as a gift to your Lord?" And Kwashiorkor says, "No. I can make a bit of a living by exhibiting this and talking about the levels of hell that you may end up in. I get a meager existence from it, but this is the only item of value that I own. I will give it to you for the sum of 100 gold ryu," which, in case anyone was wondering, that was a lot of dough. Now, Arakawa wasn't happy about hearing this. So he said to Kwashiorkor that, "No, how dare you refuse this? It is an honor to give such a gift to your lord." And Kwashiorkor said, "It is not mine to give. Unless you can pay me the 100 ryu, I cannot give it to you. Because otherwise, how will I make my way in the world? How will I earn my bread? And how will I earn my wine?" Kwashiorkor then rolled up the painting and left. Now, Arakawa didn't like being told no. And of course, when he told no to Lord Nobunaga, Nobunaga wasn't too pleased either. In order to gain his favor back, Arakawa came up with a devious plan. He had Kwashiorkor followed, and when he saw that there was no one about, he was in a quiet glen, not a bird, not a person, no one to see or hear. Arakawa seized him. He said to Kwashiorkor, You asked for 100 gold ryu? I'll give you 3 feet of lead." Then he took his sword and he killed Kwashiorkor there. He took the kakemono and brought it back to the Lord, but when they unrolled it, it was blank. There was nothing there. Now, the Lord, he assumed that Arakawa had deceived him, had played a trick on him, so he threw him in prison. He was there for quite some time, many years. But when he was eventually let out, he heard a strange story. Kwashiorkor was exhibiting that same picture at another temple. So off Arakawa went, hoping to, win back his lord's favor by getting that painting. But when he arrived at the temple, Kwashiorkor was gone. Again, he heard that Kwashiorkor was exhibiting the picture at another temple, and away he went. But when he got there, he simply found the crowd dispersing and Kwashiorkor gone. Finally, he caught up to Kwashiorkor just after he had exhibited it for the 3rd time. But he didn't find him at the painting. Oh no. he found him just when he had given up, in a wine shop. Arakawa went in, and he said to Kwashinkwoji, "You have deceived me, you deceived my lord, you must come with me and you must face up to the consequences." And Kwashinkwoji laughed and said, "Okay, well, that makes sense, I guess, but you won't deny me some wine before I go." Of course, Arakawa saw no harm in that. So Kwashinkwoji, he finished his cup of wine. Then he finished another, and another, and another, and another, until he had consumed 25 cups of wine. At that stage, he consented to be brought back to the Lord in tied hands, but still of his own free will. Came back to the Lord, and, well, they tried unrolling that painting again, but again, the kakemono was blank. Now, the Lord wasn't too pleased. He thought that now Arakawa and Kwashinkwoji had deceived him, but Kwashinkwoji laughed and he said, "A painting that is so fine often chooses not to be taken. It often doesn't want to leave its rightful owner. In order for you to become the rightful owner, you will have to pay me those 100 gold ryu." The Lord Nobunaga, he was entranced by this painting. It terrified him, it delighted him, and he wanted it. So he had Arakawa bring 100 gold ryu to Kwashinkwoji. And as soon as the ryu changed hands, the picture changed. It became more dull. The river didn't seem to flow anymore. The demons stilled. And Kwashinkwoji, he chuckled. Nobunaga, I think, thought that it was some sort of trick, but Kwashinkwoji explained, this picture was priceless, but the picture you have now is worth the 100 gold ryu that you gave me. Now, Arakawa was not best pleased by this, so what he did was he took his sword and he cut off Kwashinkwoji's head, put it in the bag with the 100 gold ryu, and tried to run off, but when he had gone, he found that the bag seemed lighter. He opened it. The gold was dust, and the head was gone. Arakawa was never seen again. But a few weeks later, in front of the palace of Lord Nobunaga, there was an old man found sleeping, snoring, with the smell of wine about him. Now, the Lord's retainers came out and saw it was Kwashinkwoji. Is he not dead? Is he not dead twice? They brought him in and put him in the dungeons to sleep it off. He continued to sleep it off, though, for days and days and weeks, so long, in fact, that Lord Nobunaga was dethroned by one of his generals, a man called I'm going to murder this, Mitsuhide. Now, Mitsuhide was of a different disposition to Nobunaga. He wasn't quite so wanton. He wasn't greedy. He didn't desire everything, but one thing he did desire was knowledge. So he had, I'm stumbling over these pronunciations. He had Kwashinkwoji taken from the dungeons and brought to his hall. He said to Kwashinkwoji, you're a strange man. And Kwashinkwoji said, I know. He said, well, how would you like to drink some wine with me? And Kwashinkwoji said, I would like that very much, thank you. So they brought out a large wine glass. Now, these wine glasses, they weren't like a little wine glass we'd see here. They were more like big bowls, like what we would think of as a fruit bowl. That would be about this, yeah, exactly, like what Emily has, about the size of the wine. And it was filled to the brim for Kwashinkwoji, and he drank it. And he drank some more. And it was filled again, and he drank some more, and he drank some more. And Mitsuaki asked him, "How much do you drink? And when do you know to stop?" And Kwashion Koji said, "Well, I know to stop when I feel myself getting a little bit tipsy." And he kept drinking. And he drank and he drank and he drank. And he drank about 1,000 bowls of the wine until eventually he said, "You know what, I'm starting to feel something now. And for all of your kindness and hospitality and giving me all the wine I could drink, almost all the wine I could drink, I'll show you a little of my art." Kwashion Koji, he pointed to a screen. And on this screen, there was painted a lake. And in the distance of the lake, there was an island. And moored to the island was a boat. Kwashion Koji waved his hand, and the boat began to grow closer and closer and closer. And when the boat came into view, the water started to flow out of the picture. Flowed faster and faster and faster, and soon they were up to their knees in water, and the boat came further, and by the time the boat left the picture, they were up to their waist in water. Kwashion Koji, he waved to Mitsuaki, got in the boat, and the boat went back into the picture, and with it the water. The boat went farther and farther and farther until it couldn't be seen over the horizon. And Kwashion Koji was never seen again.
Excellent. I kept thinking of the scene in Lord of the Rings. My fingers are tingling. I think it's beginning to affect me.
Which is annoying because, like, in The Hobbit, the elves get hammered instantly.
Oh, don't bring up The Hobbit.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in the book.
I made a bit of a mess of that story. Sorry, that was my first time telling it, but I will, yeah.
I got strong vibes of every single time I've been asked to do something for exposure.
Yeah. Literally, yeah.
Are you
It's like-
paying transport costs? No, I have to buy my own lunch. Oh, fantastic. Great exposure. And you're in the UCD film course, are you? Okay.
That really is it. It's like, oh, just do it for the exposure.
I keep forgetting UCD even has a film department. So, like,
I'm not sure they do.
that's how much exposure that would have gotten you. Like, I
Yeah.
went there.
But you think your man would learn after a while?
No, because that would involve introspection.
But also, if the image kid was moving, did he essentially just invent the GIF?
It's the ancient Japanese art of the GIF.
I always knew it was an ancient Japanese art.
It was originally done. It was originally done through high-speed origami.
I was all- It's really fast painters.
Have any of you read Moving Pictures?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not in a very long time.
Oh, the little elves.
Painting.
Anyone got another story?
Yep, I have another. This is one of my own stories. Don't worry, it's not going to be like the last time I told one of my own stories.
Okay.
Long ago, before we forgot, the newly crowned wren called all of its subjects together to ask what services they may provide their new king. The osprey was the first to speak. It stood before the wren, puffed up its chest and said, "I am a fisher, my liege." And the wren said, Whose word do I have for that but your own? The osprey was looking dreadfully offended, staring down its sharp hooked beak at this tiny little bird that had the cheek to question the osprey's skills. But the rook spoke up. I have seen it, my liege. In the mornings, the osprey soars through the sky between me and the sun. It stares down with its hard, powerful eyes into the rippling stream, past the shining reflections of the harsh sunlight. And it spots a prey both swift and cunning. Quickly, it stoops like a falling star, and quickly it rises again with the prey in its claws. The osprey is a fisher, Your Highness. Make no mistake on that. And the wren accepted this and took the osprey into their service as a fisher. And next came the thrush. And the thrush said, I am a locksmith, my liege. And the wren said, whose word do I have for that but your own? And then again spoke the rook. I have seen it, your highness. In the afternoon, the snails, they lock themselves away in their rocky homes and they shut the door behind them. But the thrush, there is no door, there is no lock that has ever been made that could not be opened by the clever and patient arts of the thrush. The thrush is one of the greatest locksmiths in the world, Your Highness. Make no mistake on that. And the wren considered this and decided to accept the thrush's service as a locksmith. And next came the heron. And the heron said, I am an enchanter, my liege. And the wren, almost predictably, asked, whose word do I have for that but your own? And up spoke the rook. I have seen it, Your Highness. In the evening, the heron, it stands one-legged in the pose of the magician, with its wings spread into a circle. From the shadow beneath its feathers, it weaves enchantments and beguilements, and it draws in the fish and the frogs, that it may snatch and eat them at its leisure. There's not a creature that can escape the enchantments of the heron. Make no mistake about that. And so the heron was accepted as an enchanter. And all through the day, each bird came up in their turn, pledging their service. And when the quality of their work was questioned, the rook spoke up for each and every one of them, until finally it came to the rook's turn. I am a Shanachie, Your Highness, a storyteller. I travel the world and I listen to everyone's stories, and I watch and I wait and I see what I need to make stories of my own, and I know what you're going to say. As the wren began to rumple and furrow its brow. But you have listened to my word on each and every one of my kin, on their skills, and accepted my word for them. What other word do you need for mine but that? But mine and your own? The wren thought about this and realized the rook was right. What other proof did the wren need of the rook's storytelling other than the fact that the wren itself had been believing it all day. And so the rook was accepted as the Shanachie, the storyteller of the birds. And that is why today, the collective noun for rooks is a storyteller.
And the collective noun for a group of storytellers
is a rookery.
That's
Sounds to me
unreal.
like the rook should have been in charge.
I've got a question though. Whose word but the wren's do we have that the wren is king?
Well, yeah. The wren cheated.
Oh yeah, completely.
Like I think like, the wren is an absolute hypocrite. The wren cheated its way into that position and is then questioning everyone else's skills.
If we ever do a live show, we need to open with that.
Yeah. I just had this image when you said the rook was right of the wren, little sleepy Victorian cap on his head, just sort of jolting up the bed in the middle of the night, going, "The rook was right."
But yeah, that story is part of a project that I am currently working on. And if anybody wants to know more about that project, for now, for the next few months, they would have to be pledged to my Patreon.
Ooh.
And how would one go about doing that?
Where would
Well,
one find such information?
The best way to find it would be to go onto patreon.com and then look for Hog and Dice. And that'll bring you there.
Remember, by its nature, crowdfunding is anti-capitalistic.
I think there might also be some links below.
Yep. There will be links below. In fact, you'll see my link tree or my bio site. I can't remember which one's in there. Either one will have all of my links in it.
It seems like a good segue into the where can you find more of us and we'll say goodbye section.
That does sound like a good segue.
Oh. I'm just imagining us all on segways now. And it's a strange view.
Well, where can we find more of you, Emily?
More of me in the linkies below. I'm generally found as Tales from the Shadows and the podcast Sounds from the Shadows, which I haven't uploaded in a while, but I'm trying to work on a plan to tackle the Tawn, because apparently I'm a masochist. I hate stories about battles. So I'm doing a thing where most of it is a story about a battle.
Let us know if you need help with that.
Well, the thing is, there's so many backstories that I can just keep moving away from the battle and go, well, this person who's about to get decapitated, let me tell you about them.
So, the battle basically amounts to Cuchulainn killed a few people that were trying to take a piss in the middle of the night. Cuchulainn then beats up several scores of people trying to cross a river. Then several children slaughtered by professional soldiers before finally the rest of the men of Ulster get over a bit of period pain, get out there and get out of them. There's not that much battling. Like all the interesting stuff is in the
backstories,
yeah.
Like honestly, Lucy Lawless could take on the Ulster men all by herself.
Lucy Lawless to play Queen Maeve.
Yeah.
When are they going to make the epic series of the Tawn? Because I mean, they've got all the sets up in Ulster left over from Game of Thrones.
I know, right? They've got so many people who grew beards for Game of Thrones, so
they've got all those swords left over.
Yeah.
Davros might make a good leg.
They've got all the people from Vikings, all those costumes. They can be readapted.
You know, we actually for those TV shows, Ireland only has one set of bows.
There's no bows in the Tawn. No one uses arrows. They use slings.
Yeah.
We don't even need them.
I've been on a few of those shows and we bring out the same set of bows every time.
We should pitch it to NI Screen and get them to...
So if anyone happens to know someone, because everything in Ireland works on nepotism.
Yep.
Yeah, it does.
God, but there's no dragons. No, there's no dragons.
There's pastes. There's
And
patience.
there's cows. Really big cows.
And doesn't the Morrigan come out of her magic cave on a one-legged horse that breathes fire?
Probably. Sounds like the sort of thing she does.
Yeah.
I know there's the one-legged horse anyway, with the red man walking
Yeah,
behind with
I might have added the fire breathing just because I feel personally there is a lack of dragons in Irish mythology.
Go back to Wales, you
We
West
sent them
Brit.
all, I was going to say, we sent them all to Wales. Enough of them. Couldn't be dealing with the feckin' dragons.
I mean, I would love to go on a trip around Wales just looking for dragons.
Yeah. I really want to go on a railway trip around the UK to like Inverness and have a look for the Loch Ness Monster, then go for a look for dragons in Wales, and
End up in Cornwall looking for pixies.
yeah.
Actually, there was a project I was doing. I didn't get. It was back when I was in university. It was about lake monsters in Ireland. I didn't get to do the collection aspect of it that I wanted to do, but my professor was telling me go to the university in near Loch Ness. They have a
The
folklore
Highlands.
department.
Yeah.
Talk to them about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Shannon, where can we find more from you?
Wandering around Ulster.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can find me wandering around Ulster. You can also find me occasionally with Tales from the Shadows or on Instagram. I don't really use social media, so usually I don't know, send a smoke signal or maybe a bird, keeping it on theme. Yeah. Bird. If you contact the seagulls from outside my window, they can like tap on the window and get me free.
And Nisha, where would we
You're
find
fine.
you?
You find me here on Unlicensed Oral Arts. I am also the person behind the Twitter where I enjoy saying we all the time, even though it's just me talking. I'm also on the Facebook page for Unlicensed Oral Arts. And beyond that, I am also where you least expect me. Next time you're peeing, have a look around. I'll probably be there. And I think that's pretty much that.
Niall has just told us that he's in Cornwall at the moment for the last year, but no pixies.
Oh, that's a shame. Or, well, no, is that a shame?
They're definitely in lockdown at the moment.
Maybe.
Oh, pixies definitely are high risk category.
Yeah, they're small.
Oh,
Like if you
Very
sneeze
old.
on them, that would probably kill them alone. The sneeze itself.
Yep.
Not even the disease that the sneeze is. Oh God, I'm a poet and I don't even.
Well, as we all remember from last month, what we all know what a sneeze actually is. It's a two-penised ghost.
Oh, Nisha!
You're welcome. I just think it's important we leave people with that information. So
Anyone
remember,
missed last month, go just scroll through till you see me making the face and then you'll know what story it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I missed last month, so.
oh, I forgot we didn't know about the nostril fun. Oh, we'll talk about that more.
Okay, and on that note, good night. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
See ya.
Try to click the